There are moments in life when the most terrifying voice you hear isn't from the outside world. It's from within you. It whispers not in the language of logic, but in symbols, fears, and intuitions too deep to name. Carl Jung, the famed Swiss psychologist and mystic explorer of the soul, knew this voice intimately. He did not only study it, he listened to it, documented it, and in doing so, almost lost himself to it. In the Red Book and the Black Books, Jung chronicles a descent unlike any other, not into madness, but into the very heart of the human psyche, where light and shadow wrestle like ancient gods. One of the most haunting entries he ever recorded reads, "Here someone stands beside me and whispers terrible things into my ear." That line is not metaphorical, it is not poetic license. It is the direct voice of his inner confrontation, the moment when the self turns against itself. This wasn't schizophrenia, it wasn't psychosis, it was something older, more sacred, and more terrifying. An encounter with what Jung would call the autonomous complexes of the psyche, the pieces of us we disown that then begin to speak with their own voice. These voices are born from everything we repress, the unlived life, the denied passion, the forgotten sorrow, the misdirected rage. To Jung, the soul was not a passive canvas on which society paints its morality. The soul was alive, painfully alive, and if you ignored its truth, it would come for you. At first, softly, then suddenly, until it was louder than everything else. In Liber Primus, Jung writes, "What is there, where there is no meaning? Only nonsense or madness, it seems to me. Is there also a supreme meaning? Is that your meaning, my soul?" He is not speaking to God here. He is speaking to his own inner self, the soul that had been ignored during decades of external success, career stability, and scientific prestige. And now it had returned, not with a whisper, but with a demand. "You force me to see the small things of my soul as large," he writes. "Is that your aim? I follow, but it terrifies me." This is the beginning of the voice turning against you, not out of hatred, but because you have denied its truth for too long. The soul becomes like a child who was never spoken to, who finally screams to be heard. Jung was not unfamiliar with success. He had worked alongside Sigmund Freud. He had published, lectured, traveled, and risen to the top of intellectual Europe. But none of that could protect him from the silence within. Because the louder your life becomes, the more deafening your soul's whisper becomes when it finally speaks. He called this period his confrontation with the unconscious. It began around 1913, when Europe stood on the edge of World War I, and Jung stood on the edge of psychic collapse. He began seeing visions, rivers of blood, sunken cities, floods, and corpses. He believed he was losing his mind, but instead of resisting, he chose to surrender, and that surrender became the greatest decision of his life. In his own words, "I had to accept that what I had previously called my soul was a dead system." His former identity, the rational man, the doctor, the successful academic, had to be broken for the real inner world to speak, and when it did, it spoke in riddles, myths, and apparitions. It was Elijah, the prophet. It was Salome, the blind temptress. It was Philemon, the wise old man. And it was the whisperer, the one who crouched close and said things he could barely admit to himself. This is the voice we all hear when we are alone, when the noise fades and the mask comes off. Sometimes it speaks cruelly, sometimes lovingly, but always it speaks truth, not the truth of society, but the truth of the soul. Jung feared this voice at first. He begged it to stop. He questioned it, insulted it, and doubted its intentions. "Who are you?" he asks the soul. "I do not trust you." He feared that trusting it would be self-delusion, or worse, self-destruction. But slowly, he learned that this fear was itself a form of resistance. The soul then spoke to me and said, "This fear testifies against me. It testifies against me. It shows that you do not yet believe. It kills the holy trust between you and me." That line, "it kills the holy trust," is a revelation in spiritual psychology. It means that to truly hear your inner voice, you must surrender the ego's constant suspicion. You must listen not like a scientist, but like a lover, with humility, with courage, and without needing control. Jung's fear was not unique. It is the same fear we all feel when the unconscious begins to rise, when we begin to question the roles we play, when the dream becomes more vivid than the meeting, when the forgotten pain of childhood knocks on the door of adulthood, when our own intuition warns us, and we ignore it. The voice that turns against you isn't evil. It only seems that way when you resist it. It is the exiled part of you that's grown bitter from neglect. And when it returns, it doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for presence. Jung knew that if he ignored the voice, it would grow more twisted, more demonic, more dangerous. So instead, he invited it in. He drew it, spoke to it, dialogued with it. The Red Book is not just a diary. It is a record of the long conversation between a man and the deepest layers of himself. And this is what makes Jung's warning so important. Most people live lives of quiet self-betrayal. They never listen to the whisper. They drown it in distractions. But Jung says no. This voice must be heard, or it will manifest in neurosis, anxiety, depression, projection. What you exile returns, but it returns distorted. In our modern age, we often associate sanity with control, to be put together, to function. But Jung teaches us that true sanity lies deeper, in the ability to relate to all parts of yourself, even the ones that frighten you, especially those. He writes, "Should I give myself completely into your hands?" And then immediately, "I do not trust you." That hesitation is everything. The inner journey begins when you notice the gap between what you know and what you fear to feel. What makes the voice so dangerous is not that it is irrational, but that it is more truthful than the mask you wear. And if you've built your entire identity on half-truths, that voice becomes your executioner. This is what Jung began to understand in his solitude. The danger was not madness. The danger was honesty. The kind of honesty that strips you of persona, of roles, of pretense. The kind of honesty that demands you die, not in body, but in ego. An ego, sensing its death, calls this process insanity, but it's not. It is initiation. In the Red Book, Jung writes, "You want to learn the supreme meaning, the meaning in itself. For this reason, you must give your soul its due. Only when you have renounced everything will it be given you." This was not academic theory. It was the reality of his descent. He had to let go of Freud, of science, of even logic itself, and stand naked before the soul. The whispering voice did not only speak terrible things, it also exposed terrible truths. That his love had been superficial, that his joy had been laced with pride, that his wisdom was full of hidden resentment. "I recognize my injustice," he admits. "It seems to me that I despised you." This is what happens when the voice turns. It becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, you see your own betrayal, the ways you abandoned your soul for the safety of society. You realize that the very things you blamed others for were parts of yourself you refused to carry. The judgment you cast on the world was a reflection of your own unlived potential. But the voice does not only accuse, it also invites. It says, "I must learn to love you." And in that sentence, the fear begins to dissolve. The terrible whisper is not an enemy. It is a messenger, a painful, raw, sacred guide leading you back to the parts of yourself you left behind. This is the paradox of Jung's warning. The voice that turns against you is also the voice that can redeem you, but only if you stop fighting it. In the Black Books, Jung writes, "You must endure the terror of knowing who you really are, not the version others see, not the one you post online, but the buried, shamed, angry, abandoned parts of you that never stopped hoping you'd return." This is why dreams are so disturbing. They do not lie. This is why silence becomes unbearable, because the voice can finally be heard. And this is why most people, unconsciously, destroy their own lives, because they cannot bear to face the whisper that speaks too close to the truth. Jung did something few dare to do. He befriended the whisper. He gave it space, ink, color, and dialogue. He listened not to what he wanted to hear, but what the soul needed to say. He allowed himself to be dismantled. And in the ashes of that dismantling, Something greater was born. Not a man of certainty, but a man of depth. He once wrote, "The soul is not at peace. She suffers, she struggles, she demands. And what she demands, above all, is attention." Think about the moments in your life when everything seemed to fall apart. Relationships, work, identity. What if those weren't failures? What if they were ruptures engineered by your own soul, designed to break the facade and force you to listen? Jung believed that neurosis is always a sign that something within is being ignored. The whisper becomes a scream. The forgotten inner child throws a tantrum. The unlived desires mutate into obsessions. And the voice that once tried to help becomes the saboteur, only because you wouldn't hear it when it was gentle. This is the root of self-doubt, not weakness, but the soul's revolt against a life that doesn't reflect its truth. When you feel like something is off, when your intuition tells you to pause, when you wake up with a weight of dread, those are not random emotions, they are psychic signals. Your inner world is not passive, it is alive. And if you lie to it long enough, it begins to retaliate. Jung teaches us that the voice is not your enemy, but it becomes one when ignored. Just like a child becomes destructive when abandoned, the soul becomes monstrous when you stop listening. But what if, instead of running from that voice, you turned toward it? What if the next time it whispered something terrible, you didn't suppress it, but asked, "Why are you saying this? What have I missed? What have I denied?" Because beneath the accusation is always a grief. Beneath the cruelty is always a cry for reunion. The voice that turns against you isn't trying to destroy you, it's trying to wake you up. But to awaken is not romantic, it is violent. It is the shattering of illusions you've wrapped around yourself like skin. It is the betrayal of what you thought was true. The whispering voice becomes your judge. It tells you, this life you're living is not yours. These beliefs are borrowed. This personality is camouflage. And if you are not prepared to die symbolically, then every word the voice speaks will feel like an attack. In the Red Book, Jung recounts a moment when he speaks to his soul and says, "You force me to see the things of my soul as large, to make them large. Is that your aim? I follow, but it terrifies me." This terror is sacred, because it is the terror of being seen, not by others, but by the eternal witness within you, that part of you which never forgot who you were meant to be. Most people live in a kind of trance. They think they are their accomplishments, their pain, their roles. They never question the identity they've inherited from parents, schools, churches, media. They never confront the deeper question, who would I be if I stopped pretending? Jung's whispering voice asks exactly this. It says, "I will not allow you to continue lying to yourself." It is not polite. It is not gentle. It breaks the bones of your self-deception, and this is why it's easier to label it madness. But the true madness is to go your whole life without ever meeting your soul. The whisper becomes unbearable when your outer life contradicts your inner truth. This creates what Jung calls enantiodromia, the return of the repressed opposite. The more you deny your real self, the stronger the shadow grows, and the more power the voice accumulates. Eventually, it no longer whispers. It interrupts. It sabotages relationships. It makes you speak out at the wrong moment. It fills your mind with thoughts you don't recognize. It drains your energy until you're forced to rest and listen. The soul does not negotiate. It breaks what must be broken. And if you don't understand what's happening, you might think you're cursed, but you're not. You're being recalled. Recalled by the voice within, the original you, the one who remembers why you came here. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But the cost is high. Repressed truth becomes illness. Denied emotion becomes addiction. Suppressed creativity becomes depression. An unlived life becomes bitterness." The voice is not trying to ruin you. It's trying to save you from becoming a ghost in your own story. In the Black Books, Jung writes something chilling. You must understand that the soul's demands are greater than your comfort. This is the core of it. The soul is not interested in how happy you are. It is not interested in whether people like you. It cares only about your wholeness. It demands integration. Not just the light, but the dark. Not just the good, but the honest. Not just the persona, but the hidden desires, the shameful longings, the sacred rage. And that's why the voice turns against you when you try to live a life that excludes these things. To silence the whisper, Jung had to descend into dreams, fantasies, visions. He had to dialogue with strange figures, prophets, serpents, dead kings, rejected women, even the devil himself. These weren't hallucinations. They were personified fragments of his own psyche, and each had a message. He wrote, "I limp after you on crutches of understanding. You stride like a god. The soul is always ahead. You cannot capture it with logic. You must learn its language, image, emotion, symbol, paradox. That's why therapy alone doesn't always work. The soul doesn't speak in diagnosis. It speaks in archetypes, in dreams, in strange compulsions, in myths, and most of all, in that subtle voice behind your thoughts. This voice might say, 'You are not who you pretend to be. You have betrayed your art. You are afraid of your own greatness. You still hate what your father did to you. You desire what you judge.' These statements seem cruel, but they are the keys to your liberation. They only feel terrible because they threaten the prison you've mistaken for safety. This is the meaning of Jung's terrifying warning. This fear testifies against you. It kills the holy trust between you and me. The fear itself becomes the wall. The doubt becomes the veil. The more you recoil from the voice, the more monstrous it becomes. Not because it is evil, but because it is tired of being unheard. You must listen. You must let the whisper become a conversation, and eventually, if you're brave, a union. You must let the whisper become a conversation, and eventually, if you're brave, a union. But what does that union look like? It is not peace in the way we usually define it. It is not the absence of pain or the stillness of a monk's mind. It is the terrifying, beautiful harmony of opposites. A man who has integrated his voice walks with ghosts and gods alike. He no longer denies the war inside. He walks with it, side by side. In the Red Book, Jung describes a meeting with a godlike inner figure who says, "You are a god yourself if you contain the god." This is not blasphemy, it is psychology. He means, if you do not project your highest potentials outward onto others, onto religion, onto leaders, onto lovers, then those potentials live inside of you. But to contain the god, you must also contain the demon. And the voice that once whispered terrible things now speaks like a teacher. It no longer punishes, it instructs, because now you have ears to hear it. But how many ever reach this place? Most turn away. They fill the silence with noise. They numb the inner whisper with endless stimulation. The phone, the drink, the job, the false urgency of 1,000 empty tasks. They fear what they might discover in the silence, because they suspect, correctly, that something ancient and powerful is trying to reach them. But they're afraid it might ask them to change, and it will. Jung did not avoid this confrontation. He broke himself on purpose. He stepped into the storm. For nearly 3 years, he wandered through the surreal wilderness of his own psyche. He wrote and painted what he saw, and he returned not as a madman, but as a guide. He warned us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he never promised it would be easy. It will cost you your false self. It will cost you the comfort of being liked, the luxury of blaming others, the narcotic of belonging to the crowd, but it will give you something else. Something beyond safety, beyond sanity, beyond social acceptance. It will give you soul. And once you hear the whisper for what it truly is, a message from the part of you that remembers, you will never be the same. You may ask, but what if I don't like what it tells me? Then you are finally seeing yourself, and this is sacred, because only when you see what is broken can you begin to heal. The whisper is the beginning of dialogue, a divine confrontation. You might see childhood wounds. You might hear your father's voice in your own mind. You might realize you've lived a life of pleasing others, never listening to your own song. The whisper won't judge you, but it will not let you lie. It will show you the faces you've buried, the angry child, the jealous lover, the abandoned artist, the ignored mystic, and it will ask you, why did you exile these parts of yourself? If you answer honestly, the whisper becomes warmer. It It becomes a hand on your shoulder in the dark. It becomes the poet's voice, the painter's muse, the mystic's revelation. And you realize it was never your enemy. It was the truest part of you, calling you home. In a lesser-known passage of the Black Books, Jung writes, "The soul of man is like a vast forest. Those who venture in must be prepared to meet wild beasts and angels alike." That's what the whisper leads you into? The forest of the self. It is not tame, but it is real. It is where you recover your instincts, your creative fire, your forgotten visions, but you will also meet despair, contradiction, and madness, because the path to wholeness is not linear, it spirals, it descends, it devours and resurrects. This is the path Jung called individuation, not becoming perfect, not becoming moral, but becoming whole. He writes, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And the whisper is your invitation to do exactly that. Most people do not want to be whole. They want to be consistent, predictable, polished. But the soul has no use for these masks. It wants the wild you, the broken you, the radiant, raging, erotic, terrified you. The whisper turns against you only when you betray that. And so, we return to the most haunting phrase from Jung's own vision. Here someone stands beside me and whispers terrible things into my ear. The voice is terrible only to the ego. To the soul, it is truth. To the soul, it is home. When Jung let that voice guide him, it did not lead him to insanity. It led him to the deeper reality, the mythic reality, where psychology and spirituality meet. And so, the voice became his ally. Your voice can too, but only if you stop resisting it. It's not here to destroy you. It's here to undo the false self you've mistaken for you, to burn the mask, to break the chain, to resurrect the hidden genius buried beneath decades of compromise. Listen closely. The whisper is still there. Behind your doubt, behind your fear, behind the silence. It has waited your whole life to be heard. And if you listen long enough, not with your mind, but with your soul, you may hear it say something strange. Not an insult, not a judgment, but a single word, soft and ancient. Remember,